Hello and welcome to episode 493 of Retro Encounter, RPG fans' bi-weekly podcast of many topics. I am your host today, Zach Wilkerson, and we are here today to talk about the first half, or really just like the mechanics, because we're going to be able to spend that much time talking about them, of Romancing SaGa 2, the very first Saga game to ever appear on Retro Encounter. And I know that our former host was not a fan of the series, and I think I like it better than him, but we'll talk more about that in a minute here. Before we get into that, let me introduce the panel, starting with you, Matt.
Hi, Zach. You've got all the 90s babies here.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And Aleks.
Salute.
Is that a reference to this game that I don't get?
Yeah, it's like in the older version, every NPC in your castle, when you talk to them, just says salute.
That's awesome. We'll talk more about the changes between the remake and the remaster, or the original, but another good thing. And someone who I know knows a lot about both versions, Ben.
Yeah, Saga is long overdue for this podcast, so I'm glad to be here finally talking about it.
Yeah, and I will levy some criticisms against the remaster or the remake, which is what I played. But I mostly had a good time too. But before we get into talking too much about it, so I know that most of us here are playing the remaster, which came out or the remake rather, because there was a remaster as well. The remake that came out was 2025. Was it last year?
2024. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most of us playing that. Aleks is subjecting himself to the original.
I mean,
remaster.
This is Retro Encounter, not Remake Encounter.
I mean, sometimes I think it could be called Remake Encounter, because I'm not interested in that original. But I want to talk a little bit about the history of Saga before we get into our personal histories of Saga, because as Ben and we've all alluded to, we've never played the Saga series on this podcast before. And the origins of Saga are sort of interesting. And I know Ben knows more about this than I do, but I know a little bit. I've actually played some of the originals. So there's a guy named Kawazu, who was originally a battle designer on Final Fantasy 1, and then he goes on and works on Final Fantasy 2 as well. And Final Fantasy 2 is very, we'll say, infamous for the way that you level in that game. Basically, like if you are using something, it levels it up. And it's kind of broken. It's the first time that system is used in Final Fantasy 2. Like infamously, like if you attack your own party members, that's like the best way to level yourself up. It doesn't work very well, but it was like a sort of this weird system. And Kwazu, who is the battle designer there, ends up kind of getting hired off to go then make a Game Boy RPG. And in the West, we called these games Final Fantasy Legend. But they were really the original 3 Saga games. And the idea is they're very nonlinear. They're a little bit more challenging. And he says a lot that, like, the way he thinks that people should level in these games is, and the way that they do level in these games is like, if you use it, that will cause it to level more. And so you've got 2 Saga games on the Game Boy. The third, Final Fantasy Legend, isn't really a Saga game, even though it's called a Saga game. And then he goes on and makes the Romancing SaGa games on the Super Nintendo. And we get, we actually have gotten most of the Saga games in the West. I actually think we've gotten all of them at this point. I could be wrong about that. Most of them.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we've ever gotten the original version of Romancing SaGa 1.
Okay.
And then some of the mobile games.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
So we've gotten most of them, but like they have reputations for being hardcore, for being nonlinear, for being difficult to access. Both actually get your hands on in the Romancing series, but also just like hard to play. And that does not jive with a lot of people. If anyone on this listens to Random Encounter, they might be familiar with the host, John O'Logan, who famously despises the Saga series. And even after playing this remake, I understand why. That's kind of the basic bones of the Saga series. Is there anything major or massive I'm missing about what the Saga series is, Ben, or anybody else who wants to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that Kawazu took a lot of inspiration specifically from like tabletop role-playing games. So part of the like non-linearity in the series is taking more from that kind of tabletop like D&D kind of experience and trying to replicate that in like an RPG, video game RPG. And so that's like an important thing. to mention when talking about Saga, I think, is that it has a little bit more in common in some ways with like a CRPG than it does maybe with the traditional JRPG, you know, background that most Square Enix games come out of. Though it does have a lot of those elements as well, obviously. And then also, you know, that got taken to an extreme degree with Unlimited Saga, which is like literally like a board game RPG on the PlayStation 2, and probably one of the most divisive RPGs that Square Enix has ever made. But most of the Saga games are a little more traditional while still being like non-linear and open-ended and more mechanics focused.
Yeah, and that inspiration is like you notice the stark contrast with like other of the main like JRPG designers of the time. Like most JRPG developers were directly inspired by like Western digital RPGs. Like they were introduced to RPGs through Wizardry and Ultima essentially, and those like tried to adapt tabletop games in their own ways, but like the restrictions of the computer inevitably created like a more linear experience, so they didn't really have that tabletop framework. Tabletop RPGs just weren't that big in Japan at the time. So then the Saga having like this more like free scenario system, party building, you know, it respects like player agency and like more personal like player driven story development
Hmm.
over like the heavy focus on characterization and cutscenes that really I think became the defining factors of JRPGs throughout the 90s. And also, as I definitely learned with this game, it also expects you to learn the rules through like reading guides, and some trial and error, to actually like play the game properly. It doesn't just like create like a very like simple gameplay experience the way like Dragon Quest did or Final Fantasy does also.
Hmm.
But actually like you have to engage more with the systems, you have to read about them to really like have an understanding of how to play in the first place, which is very tabletop like.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's even true of the most simple games in the series. Like even the first two Saga games on the Game Boy are pretty mechanically dense for a Game Boy RPG, with a lot of like you know, nonlinear progression and interesting things like, you know, eating monster characters that eat meat and then morph
Yeah.
based on that, and yeah, just a lot of really unique kind of mechanics that you wouldn't find in a lot of other JRPGs.
Yeah, those Game Boy Saga games are hard.
Hmm. Yep.
I've played them. I played them when they came out, and not when they came out, but like right around when they came out. And then I played them relatively recently. I reviewed the collection of Saga for the site. I don't know when it came out, like a while ago now.
2021,
I don't
2022 or
know,
something
man.
like that. Yeah.
It came out a while ago, but yeah. So I haven't played a lot of Saga games, but you know, I think that everything you're saying is totally accurate to the way that even I was experiencing them as a kid. Like there's this fight against this guy named Apollo in this second Saga game on the Game Boy that I have never gotten past. Well, when I was a kid, I never got past, and it was like this like sort of infamous thing that I would go back to like every couple months, and my cousin and I would try to figure it out. And I think that we were probably just soft locked into not having the right skills. But they were really weird and really challenging. And like I remember, you know, when you're a kid and you're playing games like that, like and they're throwing different mechanics at you, you don't I don't think I really realized how complicated what was happening to me was. I just knew that I couldn't do it.
Mm.
I was just losing a lot. And then I played Saga Frontier right around when it came out, sort of at the boom of, you know, the PS1
Hmm.
RPG era. And I played through that and really struggled with it as well, even though I was an RPG veteran. I was 12 or 13. I know it seems weird to say that, but I'd played a lot of RPGs at that point. So it's sort of a series that like I've sort of known by reputation, sort of heard about by reputation, and I've played some in them, but like I've really struggled. And so it's interesting to come to this one where I still struggled, and it still has this remake has some serious weirdness to it still sometimes. But to see them try to kind of meet you where you are. And so that's my history with the series, and sort of how I've seen it kind of move throughout my life.
Yeah. So my first Saga game was the remake of Romancing Saga 1 on the PlayStation 2, which is often referred to as like Minstrel Song. Um, and I really enjoyed that game, fell in love with that game with the, you know, very heavy emphasis on mechanics and nonlinear storytelling, the different character paths you can choose, and all the different, you know, ways you can progress through that game. And then I just, went back and played the Game Boy games. I played these remasters as they've come out. Thankfully, because Kawazu is such a high-ranking developer and executive at Square Enix, Saga's his baby, so it continues to get resources poured into it, probably long after any other series would. Especially because even though this series is very popular in Japan, it's never been super popular in the West. But yeah, and I played the remaster of this game when it came out on the Vita and in I think 2017, and I really enjoyed it. I really like I think that the generational system is really really unique and interesting. And though that game, obviously that version of the game has a lot of issues or flaws, growing pains associated with it, I guess. And then I played this remake when reviewed it for the site when it came out in 2024, and absolutely loved it. And this, to me, I think is my favorite Saga game now, after having played the remake a few times. And yeah, I just love it. And if I had to rank like the Square Enix like IP, to me Saga is the number one. I'd put it over Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. So
Hot take.
yeah. But just
think
it
that
just speaks to me.
You're alone on that front, I think, Ben.
Yeah, well, not. I mean, on this podcast, yes, but I think Patrick would agree with me. Pat might agree.
Even
with me
over
a little.
Final Fantasy with Pat, I don't know.
I don't know, but he loves Saga. I know that he does.
That we know. Yes, that's
yes,
true.
Yes. He'd at least respect my choice, I think. But yeah, I love the series.
We respect your choice, Ben.
Well, thank you.
Even
Thank
if it's
you.
wrong. Yeah, I mean, like, you all know I like grew up playing tons of JRPGs, having two older brothers also, but curiously enough, I don't remember like any exposure to the Saga games in my house, and I'm not sure if my brother had tried any of them and just like was like, I hate this, it's too complicated or what. But I definitely don't think I could have handled the complexity as a kid. I don't think I was smart or persistent enough. But a few years ago, I did want to, educate myself on the series, just to see what's up. So I picked a couple of the games and just like put a couple hours into them. Well, more than a couple in one of them. And those were Final Fantasy Legend 2, Romancing SaGa 2, and Saga Frontier. I enjoyed, Final Fantasy Legend 2, like you were going over, Zach. Had some novel game systems, especially for like a Game Boy game, but nothing about it like really gripped me, and probably the black and white Game Boy like presentation didn't help. The furthest one I got into was definitely Saga Frontier, which I actually like quite a bit. I think that game has some amazing visual presentation for the PS1. I think that's Kenji Ito's best soundtrack. It wasn't too hard to figure out, but still, that non-linear structure could be confusing at times. And as seems to be a little par for the course with the series, the story was mostly a bunch of nonsense, despite trying to be kind of character-driven with different protagonists and whatnot. But I played the least of Romancing SaGa 2, pretty much because it just like seemed so complicated. I wasn't ready for it, even though I really loved its premise. And now going back to it for the podcast, which is something I really wanted to do, I'm having a pretty good time getting used to what's going on in this game, feeling the sense of progression. Unlike the rest of you, I'm playing the remaster version, the first localized version in English. And it's honestly cool to play a game that feels so distinctly, Super Nintendo coded, yet so unique from every other RPG I've ever played on the console. I think there's something really neat, like seeing something completely different done through like the same hardware at the same time, just through like the creativity of the designer. And that feeling is one of my favorite things about the game, honestly, so far. So I wonder if I'd actually still prefer the recent remake with all the quality of life additions, even though there are definitely points in this game where I could definitely use some more quality of life, and we can get into that as we continue the conversation, I'm sure.
Yeah, this is another first timer for me. I've never played Saga before. I've always been a Final Fantasy guy growing up. And I feel like even here in Japan, like it's not part of the public zeitgeist like Dragon Quest would be, and like to a lesser degree Final Fantasy. I like it, like, I'm pleasantly surprised by this game, like just for the yeah, like you mentioned, Alex, the features like the fast travel and like all these kind of things that make it unique from Final Fantasy VI at the time or like other games on
Mhm.
the Super Famicom. I like it for that, which makes me wish like my image of this game from the box art that I've seen and from the screenshots of the old versions, like the sprite work, it's very European flavored, which I think is like the thing that sets it apart from Dragon Quest or even Final Fantasy especially. I wish that the new art style of like the remake that we're playing had gone further away from like generic anime 3D art, you know. But I like it for a lot of reasons. I think my biggest exposure to it was like the music from Patrick, like you said, Ben. Like Pat loves the soundtracks to these games, so I've listened to it more than I've ever seen it. But yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised and also very annoyed in many ways. But I think this game has made me it's made me Saga curious, I'll say.
Yeah, Saga Curious is a good way of putting it. You know, like I think that if this is the game that has the most quality of life features, then I don't know if I can play any of the rest of them. Because I'm like, dang, like there are still times that it is like aggressively like you made one small choice and now you're gonna have to run around like crazy because you made that small choice. And like there's other obtuseness to it. We'll get into that. But I think that sometimes I think with this game, the times of the quality of life or the times the game wants to meet you where you are sort of like kind of works against the game design a little bit. Like it's like it gives you these quest markers, but you don't really know why you're supposed to go there. Like there's some weirdness to it, but I'll get more into that as we go.
Oh wow, quest markers sounds nice.
I know, right?
Mhm.
I was thinking you probably would appreciate that.
Mhm.
It very
So
much
yeah,
feels like it's like begging you to do a second playthrough. That's the feeling I get, where it's like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
oh, like don't worry, this will go smoother the next time. And I'm like, I don't know if
yeah.
there's gonna be a next time. You know what I mean?
It
But
it's definitely a game that is meant to be replayable, and I think like this is my, you know, I guess third time playing through the well fourth I
oh
guess
wow.
because yeah fourth time playing through the game, and like I think every time like it is a unique experience in a lot of ways every time, right? And I don't think a lot of games can say that
Mm,
that you can play through it in a different way. You can play it that many times and play through it in a completely different way every time, and have see different things and see new quests and see new wrinkles to things you've experienced before. And that I think in the pursuit of that, that's a very ambitious goal, and then sometimes some things fall through the cracks, right? Like, you get a little too close to the sun when you're making that, and I think they achieve it in a lot of ways, but there are ways in which the underlying foundation that allows for that to happen kind of falls apart in some sense. So I definitely understand like the frustration you guys are talking about, but I do think it's worth it ultimately.
mm,
Yeah, and I'm glad you're talking about that because I actually think that the way the story is told in this game it is really unique. And it's not because the story itself is not very interesting at all.
Mhm.
So just to kind of step back here for a second, those of you who haven't played Romancing Saga 2, or it's been a minute, although I'm not going to give a whole lot away here. The game opens with you as the Emperor of the Varaness, is how you say it.
Yeah,
Um,
Varens. Yeah,
Varaness, whatever,
yeah.
Empire, and you're trying to deal with some monsters around, and you have the Emperor, and he has two sons. One of them is gonna, take the throne. The other one is younger. He's more of a like sort of a tactician, but he's not very good in battle, but he's accompanying the father along. And one time when the father is taking the younger son out, the village, or not the village, but like the actual, like the seat of the empire, is attacked by one of the famed seven heroes. And it's not explained super well what these seven heroes are at the beginning of the game. You sort of discover through flashback if you're playing the remaster, I'm sorry, the remake, that the seven heroes like sort of saved the world a long time ago, but then they were rejected by the people around them because they were afraid of their history or whatever. And so one of the seven heroes kills the person who's supposed to be taking the throne. So the son of the emperor. Then the emperor, of course, wants to go get revenge. The emperor dies as well against that one of those seven heroes. And you discover sort of around that moment that this empire has what's called an inheritance magic. So as one of the emperors dies, they can pass along their skills and their abilities to the next emperor or empress or whoever. Um, and that's what happens as he dies. He passes along his abilities to his son. His son then goes to get revenge, and then basically then the premise of the game becomes like you're supposed to over generations pass down these abilities, and as you pass down these abilities, you're taking down more and more and more of these famed seven heroes who are sort of terrorizing the world now. And that is the story. I don't really think there's a lot else to it than that. There's a little bit more about like some of the heroes are further gone than others. There's a little bit more to it than that, but that is really it. Like you don't really have after this characters. You don't really have after this people who you're really following. But what you have is you have these individual towns and you have these different territories, because one of the things you're trying to do is you're trying to sort of free these territories from, I guess, the oppression and then have them join the empire. I don't want to get into the weird politics of that, but um, you're trying to free these different territories. And as you're freeing these different territories, they come under the empire. You get money as a result of bringing them under your wing, which again, I guess you're the good guy here still. And you get to know sort of the problems that are happening. And there are times when, like, if you skip a generation or a generation is skipped because, like, either you've gotten in too many battles, you die in battle. If you die in battle, that skips a generation. Um, if any of those things happen, but like you can see consequences. Like there was one place where I started the quest, but I didn't finish it. And it turns out like the kingdom was toppled in the meantime of one generation moving to another. So like the storytelling is really interesting because it becomes about like how does the world evolve or change based on your interactions with it, but it's not about you at all, really. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah. It's like a historical record of like the history that you're making as you progress through the game. Essentially, it's more of a generation spanning narrative of like a society and the rulers of that society, as opposed to like individual characters and their motivations and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the way like you're presented with these choices and allowed to make them, it almost reminds you of like a BioWare game or something. Like you'll reach
Mhm.
like a certain impasse in like a quest, and then it's just like, oh, do you make this choice or this choice? And that'll lead you down like a different path, and then you might not see what the exact consequences are until like the end of the quest, or sometimes like a couple generations further into the game. And that's really like it's such a solid concept for like a narrative design for this game to like be based on like, you move through generations, you're picking different emperors, you like form an attachment to like a certain party, they all go on their journey, they make choices, and then like down the line later in the game you see how the world is evolving based on that. And that's like, especially for the time, oh my god, that's like a compelling narrative hook that isn't
Mhm.
unlike like anything else we were seeing in Super Nintendo games at the time.
And it's well suited to the interactive format, right? Like it's not. I think a lot of times in video games, particularly at this time where the original came out, you have like the kind of trappings and necessities of a video game like getting in the way of the narrative and storytelling, right? Where this game is very much based around. It's a very much mechanics first, right? Like actually the even like the concept of the seven heroes was not included until pretty late in development. And so it's more like they had the Kawazu had the idea of like, okay, we want to have these successive generations and the mechanic of passing down your progression, your skills and abilities over this long period of time. And then they developed like a narrative that would suit those mechanics. And
Mhm.
so I think it's like very much a mechanics driven approach to narrative, and that I think is what makes it stand out, compared to a lot of other games at the time or even today, just because they're not like really stuck in the kind of storytelling tropes that would often get in the way of like mechanics or gameplay.
Yeah, and I do really like the prologue between like Leon the Emperor and his son Gerard, because it does it does a really good job teaching you how to embrace failure through the generation system and how like that can enhance like the narrative experience you're having as a player, like going to face that hero glimmering the evasion for his most dangerous attack, but then dying. But then, like as the sun, you come back, and the second attempt is easier because you've glimmered that ability that allows you to like counter his strongest attack. Like I think if just more of the game had even that minor level of storytelling attached to it, it would be more compelling. Um, like it almost made me think of you guys know like Monolith's Middle Earth games, like with the Nemesis system.
Mhm.
If this game had like more reactivity in terms of like that kind of stuff through the generations with the heroes, I think that would be like a really cool way to flesh out like the systems driven storytelling. But I'm not sure if they added anything like that in the remake.
Well, because like the setting of the game begins in the year 1000, I think it can end in the year 4000. Like that's like the maximum distance that you can go. But it doesn't feel all that different. Like I that is one complaint I had is like despite doing all these major things, right? And despite jumping millennia into the future eventually, right? It doesn't feel that different. Like the villages look the same, the people look exactly the same. Like it'll be like, "Oh, this key
Hmm.
character is like he's not Bobby, he's Bobby the 29th or something," right? Which is kind of like okay. And like when you talk to the characters, like you'll come back to see like the fruits of your labor, and the character Bobby the 29th will say, "Wow, you freed us from that blah blah blah," right? But it's like that happened in canon like 400 years ago. Like why are you even thinking about it? You know what I mean? Like it felt a little bit like everything felt more recent. Like I don't think they needed to
Mm.
jump 80 years between each hero generation because it didn't feel like 80 years. The exception to that being maybe the professor character who makes like an android that can join your
Mhm.
party eventually. But beyond that, like it would be cooler if like in a let's say if they made a new Saga game, you actually see the setting change from like old fantasy to like modernity and like futurism. Like that would be cool, I think. But that's obviously too ambitious for the Super Famicom, but I think with sprites, it's easier to convey like it's harder to see how similar everything looks when it's a sprite, I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I was
Yeah.
gonna ask you guys like if like it sounds like what you described is basically the same as the Super Nintendo version. I think that's a bit of a missed opportunity with the remake to like flesh out the narrative impact of everything you've done and how your choices are reflected. Because yeah, unfortunately, it sounds like they didn't really lean into that with the remake.
Make the fashion
No.
change or the technology or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, or
Yeah.
even just the
No.
dialogue more reactive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the most of the narrative editions are just the flashbacks that like flesh
Okay.
out the seven heroes and kind of explain their how they got to where they are at the point at which you're like facing them in the game. But not really anything changed to the like present day setup of the narrative or anything like that.
And the big bad, hey? I was kind of surprised like termites. Termites are the big bad, right?
Mhm.
They're tunneling under the city. And like when you finally meet them, you're like, "Oh, it's just like a big ass termite." Like that's like there's nothing like
Yeah.
fantastical
Well,
about it, really. But
Kawazu really likes this idea of like a tragedy that's almost like a natural force that has
oh,
no real um that like humanity has to contend with, but there's no real like rationality to it, right? And so the termites kind of represent that. And there are other in the other some of the other Saga games that deal with like a world ending calamity. It's often something like that, where like humanity is having to grapple with something that's beyond like kind of their understanding to a certain extent. And so the termites are kind of that, right? They're just kind of like a natural force. They're like consuming everything, and they can't really be reasoned with or defeated in any other way. And so the seven heroes are kind of forced into this situation where they're like trying to preserve humanity against this like this foe that they can't really defeat or know. It's almost like a I don't know, like a Starship Troopers kind of like
yeah.
approach,
Yeah.
which is interesting, right? I mean, it's definitely very different from the types of like villains or like antagonistic groups you would see in other RPGs, right? It's not like the charismatic villain. It's more just like this thing that's happening they have to deal with.
Yeah,
It's
I
a very
think the
Japanese thing, but they still have the sexy termite queen. Don't forget
Yeah,
her.
that's true.
But
That's true. Yeah.
I think that the termite quest is a good example of what this game does well and what it doesn't do well in terms of the storytelling, because like you're getting at, Matt, like nothing about the termite quest like thematically or plot wise is like interesting at all. But the fact that like the way you encounter it is like you're in the savannah, right? And you
Hmm.
go to a village, and you're just like, okay, this is like a village, this is like this new region, and then you go sleep at the inn, and then a termite outbreak happens, and then there's like this hole in the ground, and then you have to go in, and then you fight all the termites, you fight the termite queen, and then there's also like this mole person there, just like, oh, thanks for um helping me with the termites. Maybe the mole people will prosper from here. And then you go back, and then there's like a whole mole civilization. It's like, okay, this plot wise, this is like nothing. But like the way you've
Hmm.
interacted with the scenario and the way now it's like built giving you like a new character class, essentially, the way it was like encountered naturally just through like
Mm.
a surprising event of sleeping in this inn, not expecting much. Especially like my version didn't have any quest markers, so I had no idea that would lead to like this whole termite scenario. That's still like really neat, and it was a memorable experience just for the way you encounter it organically rather than anything regarding the story itself.
Yeah, the game is very good at presenting like all of these different unique and interesting scenarios to you and setups, and it's very unpredictable, right, with where things are
Yeah.
going to go or what you're going to see next. And it's in that way I think it is kind of bringing that tabletop influence, right? Because
Mm.
it's like, oh, like Kawazu is kind of like the dungeon master, and he's cooking up some new crazy encounter or thing that's unexpected for you, right? And that's definitely a different, the narrative thread connecting all those things may not be super well defined or justified, but there is something in positive about the variety and novelty in that, right? Compared to a lot of other games that, you don't really know what to expect, or all of a sudden you're in a volcano area and there's like lizard people, and then you can bring the lizard people into your party, and like basically Pompeii happens to them. And like, I mean, there's just so many, different scenarios and ideas that it just throws at the player. And they all kind of coexist in this world in a way that is like kind of interesting and unique.
So you're saying the Empire government is made of lizard people? Is that correct, Ben? Can you say that closer to the mic?
5G lizard people.
I was actually surprised too, because like they play that close to their chest, where like they don't reveal the mole people, the lizard people, the mermaids, whatever, like until pretty late in the game. Like I'm like, oh, it's just humans in this world, humans and monsters. But then, yeah, like your party really fleshes out in like an interesting way. Like there's like, I don't know what, like 30 plus classes that
Hmm.
you can gather. Like that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and Saga as a series in general just loves the non-human party members and like the weird kind of character classes.
Yeah.
That's a very common thing between like the monster classes in the early games, or the robots with guns and stuff like that. Yeah, they're not afraid to get weird with it, and I do think Romancing Saga in some ways is like more conventional with its like world construction than a lot of the other Saga games are. But it still has a little bit of room to get kind of weird and interesting in there.
Yeah, like the robot will like act on her own. Like every time her turn comes up, she'll just act in whichever way she sees fit, which is kind of interesting.
Oh,
Mhm.
she
Yeah.
was an emperor for me, so or that didn't happen for me. Pretty powerful one. Good stats.
Oh, that's a good idea though. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting because like what you guys are talking about in terms of the narrative design is like it's constantly keeping you on your toes, right?
Mhm.
Like you
Yeah.
don't know what decision you're going to make is going to have an impact. You don't know what's going to do what. And I think that in the remake they do their best to maintain as much of that as they can,
Yeah.
but I don't think it totally works. Because I think from a game design perspective, as frustrating as I'm sure it is not to have quest markers and things like that, sort of that like emergent storytelling, it would feel maybe a little more natural, I think, in in the original Romancing Saga 2. Not that I want to play it. I'm good. But I think it's interesting. But I think that like it's the from a broader perspective, like the whole game is about like I never felt comfortable while I was playing this game, even the remake version of it. Like the like the combat design, I was constantly like, oh, am I making the right decision here? When I'm doing inheritances, because you get to choose who, when you actually do die or choose to abdicate the throne or whatever happens, because sometimes, like a lot of times when you beat a hero or you one time I just liberated a territory and I had just skipped a generation, like, I don't know, 30 minutes ago. I skipped a generation again. But you get to
Yeah,
choose which characters or which classes you want to inherit into. But like each time I was like, oh, am I making the right decision? Am I doing this in the way that I should be? And so I think that the narrative design and then the game design in general, just constantly being like always on your toes, always uncertain. I think
Mm.
the way that it melts together is really interesting.
yeah, and I was just gonna say, Zach, that like the advancing a different generation based on, that's based on a variety of factors. So it's like a combination of what event that you're progressing, and then also how many battles you fought. So there are some times where progressing in a certain event, like getting a territory under your control or defeating a hero, well, generally defeating the heroes will advance, but or you
Mm.
might defeat other enemies that aren't one of the heroes, for example, and it may advance or it may not, depending on how many battles you fought or what else you've done. So that is variable as well. You're not always going to advance at the same points to the next generation.
I was a bit annoyed every time that happened because I'm like, oh no, 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 because I have to like re-outfit my party and like, yeah, like you don't get to choose the class of the emperor. Like they give you like a rotating selection of 5
Mm-hmm.
people or so,
Hmm.
which is a bit
Yeah.
annoying. So like for example, my first like reincarnation or whatever, I became a martial artist, right? And that like laid the foundation for my gameplay style for the rest of the game without really me intending it to. So like no matter which emperor I had after that, like which class, I was always using martial arts and I was always like throwing the light fist ability, which worked out for me for like 20 hours in the game. And like it's still working in the end game. But I didn't really like that part too much because I don't know. When I look at the stats of like because whatever class you are as the emperor, that also carries over into the next generations when the non-emperor NPC characters are, that class. Does it make sense? So, like for example, every one of my classes in my party has a super high martial arts stat because I played as the emperor as them, and I carried
Hmm.
that stat over. So I thought that was a little bit interesting. Like I can see how you can break the game or like min max in a good way, like Final Fantasy Tactics. But like you, Zach, I was the whole time I was like, am I doing the right thing? And like I feel like I'm screwing this up and like again, oh, I got to do this way in a second playthrough, but I don't know if I want to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason too that they force you into choosing between a set, like a handful of classes, is that you really need to switch classes. As the emperor, they don't want to let you get into a situation where you're just picking the same type of class every time,
Mm.
because you need the formations that you get from swapping classes. And if you don't have like the right formations, I mean, that can really make or break you in the end game as well. So that is kind of a gameplay conceit. But I think also, with the amount of classes that there are, if they gave you access to just all of them at one time, that could also be really overwhelming. So, giving you a limited set each generation to like pick from, I think is kind of trying to do a happy medium there. But I get what you're saying, Matt, that it also kind of
And
feels restrictive in some
I,
ways.
I like that there are times where like they build it into the quest progression of like you need an emperor with like sea
Hmm.
time experience, right? And you have to choose like the Corsair
Hmm.
emperor the next time. I did like how they did that. Um, but
Corsair never came up for me again, not once.
yeah, yeah. Just to get on a boat, I'm like, well, I have a
True story.
Corsair with me. Like, why does the emperor have to drive the boat? But can I just say the Corsair? I mentioned this like when I was playing it. Like I messaged you guys. I was playing with the English voices on. The Corsair voice in English is so funny, right? It's like the most white guy voice ever reading like piratey lines, right? So he's like I just beat you, matey, like in that cadence and everything. And I'm like, okay, you could at least put on a pirate voice. Like, come on. He's like, yar, like with no
No passion behind the
there's
yar.
no Long John
Yeah.
Silver
Yeah.
to it, you know what I mean? Like I was really disappointed.
But yeah, I do like this kind of adaptiveness from both like the main game systems and the narrative that like every like time you reset your emperor, because you're always switching different classes, they make that like specific run. I guess like it is kind
Mhm.
of roguelike in a way. It makes it
Yeah.
feel
No,
distinct.
for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so I guess like you could just be hiring the same subclasses for like the rest of your party members, but you're also unlocking new classes at such a um fast level that why would you? Like wouldn't you want to
Yeah.
like see what these new classes have to offer? I none of
I
the
don't know, because
classes
my
I've
bow
picked so far.
user's attack power was too high to ever change that out. I needed that.
Oh yeah,
I didn't change
the bow's
classes
been
like basically at all.
fantastic.
Yeah, the bow's
Yeah.
ridiculous in the remaster or the remake. I'm gonna keep messing that up.
And
But,
heavy infantry, like in the front. Oh,
oh
man.
my god.
Yeah,
Parrying
so good in
everything.
the early
integral.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Though
What-
there
what
are
does he
other
say?
classes that are good for that. Like the salamander, like the lizard
Yeah.
are also good tanks. Yeah.
Not today. That's what he says. Not today. Not today.
Yeah.
Like every single time. Yeah.
Something I did want to ask you all is just like I mentioned how like okay like the quest choices are like a little Western RPG-ish.
Mhm.
How like transparent did the decisions feel to you? Because that was like maybe some of the biggest frustrations I've had with the older remaster so far. Is like I can give an example like the Dragon Laird side quest with the martial artists.
Mm.
Like I talked to the guy. Like first of all, okay, this remaster came out in what 2016,
20.
and
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
feels like you're playing just a Super Nintendo like brutal translation from that time. Like
Mhm.
it doesn't
Oh.
feel like they put much care into it at all.
Yeah.
And so I was talking to like the leader of the martial artists. He's like, "Oh, like there's this slime, we can't beat it. Uh will you help us defeat it? We need to protect our honor. We will come to the cave after." And
Oh.
I'm like, okay. I go defeat the slime, but then I see there's more of the dungeon, so I keep exploring the dungeon and I,
Mhm.
clear out the dungeon. And then I go back to him. He's like, "What? Now we can't protect our honor. Have at me." And then like
Yeah.
I end up fighting. I'm like, "What is going on?
Yeah.
what
So
choices am I making here?" Like that's the one thing that has been a little tedious because of
Mhm.
the bad translation.
yeah, the localization is definitely very improved. So in that scenario that you're talking about, Alex, what happens is you go to the Dragon's Lair first and talk to the martial artists, and they say to you like, "Hey, like we need your help because there's some really difficult monsters in this cave, and we're having trouble dealing with them." And they're like, "But there's the final monster at the end of the cave. You need to let us defeat them, or else the villagers will lose faith in us, right?" And so that's basically what he says, like we'll lose our reputation with the nearby village. And so when you go and then complete that, the first initial part of that dungeon, then what it gives you like a choice there, and it says go back and
Oh, amazing.
notify them, the martial artists, or continue on in the dungeon. So then what you do, you obviously can choose to leave and then tell them, "Hey, I cleared the way so you guys can go fight this final monster in there." Or you can choose to continue going. Now, it doesn't tell you what will happen, right? Like, it's not saying if you do this, you know, there's a point of no return and they'll fight you or what. It doesn't tell you any of that, but it
Which
does
is still
tell
fair
you,
enough. Yeah.
yeah,
Like you
yeah,
don't want to like spoil the quest, but like yeah,
right.
presenting one more like choice prompt that's all it needed,
Mhm.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's much more clear even before the choice prompt that like you're supposed to like, or that there is value to letting them finish the dungeon rather
Yeah,
than
yeah.
yourself. Yeah, yeah.
I don't think that comes up very often in the game, though. Like, there aren't that many decisions in that way. Although I think in part two, episode two, like we'll talk about like later game, like a lot of quest directions can rapidly change and like unexpectedly change, which can be annoying. Of like,
Mhm.
there are many cases like actually in the mid game, I forget which quest it was, but they told me like collect this, collect that, collect this, right? And I went around the world collecting everything, and it took me like an hour to collect each item for it was the witch's potion for the mermaid.
Mhm.
And then eventually I did one other quest and like it canceled out all my progress with the other items for the potion. And it's like, oh, hi, I'm a mermaid. Nice to meet you. Let's go. And I'm like, oh, I could have just met this person from the get-go. Like it doesn't really convey that very clearly. Like I think Zach mentioned like the quest markers can be a bit vague at times. It's like, okay, I'm heading to this country, to this glowing yellow thing, but I have no idea what it is, right? I didn't
Yeah.
like that. Like, I think the chronicle journal thing that you use to like track the quest progression is a little too vague, or I don't know. I wasn't, helped by it in any way. I had to
See,
like
I
double down many times.
I yeah, I mean, I think you're right, Matt. Like and I think that's very intentional, right? Like I think they're like, how do we make this like quest tracking more clear to the player, but without actually like just telling you what to do and where to go. And
Mm.
so it is very much like it'll tell you, oh, you can go to this location, but then it doesn't tell you what to do in that location. It just tells you to go to that location. You have to figure it out,
It's like
right?
D&D. You have to like ask
Yeah.
around in like the
Yes.
tavern. Yeah.
Yes. And there are times where like you need to talk to a bunch of NPCs and the quest marker will take you to which NPCs you need to talk to. But then that might lead you to a point where you then have to figure out what you're supposed to do next yourself. And like the dialogue from the NPCs may give you hints, but it's not going to just tell you outright. And the quest marker then is like gone away, right? And it doesn't
Yeah.
tell you like, hey, run here and do this.
Mm.
But I actually think that that's a very good happy medium that the remake balances between the two, right? Because I think if it were to just be like a tradition or like a typical like how I don't know it works in like Assassin's Creed or something where you could just like follow the line to like where you're supposed to go, I think that would like remove a lot of the more
Yeah.
interesting aspects of the kind of quest design and sense of discovery that you get, and emergent gameplay like you guys have been talking about, if it gave you too much more information. So I think it does strike a nice balance between like it gives you more information so you're never like completely lost, but not enough so that it just tells you where to go and you feel like you're on autopilot. You still have to like
Mm.
figure things out for yourself.
That does sound like a happy medium, but I'll also say just like not having any quest markers and discovering things like the termite quest just through sleeping in the inn randomly because I was like you could use the recovery, or in the inn with the mermaid dancer just going to see the dance like twice and then realizing is a different song, so going a third time and then having the actual quest start to develop, like that level of emergence with no markers has been probably the biggest highlights of the game. Like when it works so well with this Super Nintendo version. But it does
Right.
sound like what you're describing is, like you're saying, a happy medium.
And some of the things that you just described, Alex, like are still like that, like the mermaid song and everything.
Okay.
Like yeah, that's still the same. And there are still a lot of moments of just like emergent gameplay where you'll go somewhere and then like all of a sudden another quest starts happening and you had no indication that that was the case.
Okay, good.
But it's more just like there's never a point where you're like, I don't even know what I would do right now to like progress in the game at all, right? Like you always know a few different things that you can do, and then you just decide between which one you want to pursue.
And you could abdicate, like if it is locked behind a new class, you can
Yes.
just abdicate in the same generation to, okay, I'm going to be a Corsair, I'm going to be a whatever to get through this one thing. Yeah.
Yes, and that's something that's not in the remaster. You can't in the remaster from like 2017. You cannot abdicate the throne. You have to either die or go to like the end of a
It,
line.
it's like I can't learn to pilot a ship in 80 years. I better kill everybody in my party and then wait 100 years. It's like you could just learn how to drive a ship,
Yeah, the idea of like having to have a certain emperor class to do a quest with the amount of information I have in this remaster sounds insane. So I don't know if I'm ever going to see any of those quests.
You don't
if
actually
that's still
need
the
to do
case
that
here.
quest because I never did.
Okay.
So it's just another way of approaching one of the heroes, I think. And I think like, but I think I'm a little bit on Alex's. So I agree with Ben. It is a happy medium, but I think it's like it ends up feeling like kind of weird, like where like it directs you in ways that seem arbitrary, and then it doesn't in other ways. Like it's not a big deal. Like I don't really care that much, but it ended up feeling like it was shoehorned into something that was different. And I think that another way that becomes true, we haven't really talked about this yet, is with some of the battle mechanics, specifically LP, which I think that Aleks, we're all familiar with it. So if you haven't played the game in a while, remember that every character is given, in every generation is given a certain amount of LP, which basically means like they can only die a certain number of times before they perma die. And then if the emperor dies that number of times, then like the generation is going to skip. But in my playthrough, and I was playing on classic, and I ran into some real trouble in this game. I got just obliterated plenty of times, but I never came even really that close to burning through my LP for any of my characters.
Mm.
And that was even true in, and I don't want to get into this, in the final Emperor route where like you really have to go through like kind of a gauntlet and try not to lose all that LP. And so like to me, like the LP system felt like it it felt like at first I was like, oh my gosh, what are you telling me, that I'm gonna perma die? I didn't realize you could have like an infinite number of generations almost. I didn't realize that you were gonna get these people back. I just thought like, oh, like if you run an LP, like you're skipping a generation. And how many generations do I have? I don't know, because the world couldn't possibly stay the same for 3,000 years, as Matt alluded to earlier. It does. But the LP system here feels like a non-starter, inconsequential thing that doesn't do a lot in the remaster to me.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the one, like the LP system, this is just a typical Saga system, right? So like the other Romancing Saga games have this as well. And then like Scarlet Grace, for example, also uses this system. I think that it it adds that extra level of tension, particularly if you have like a character goes down quite a few times. They don't have these huge LP pools. Usually it's somewhere between 10 and 20 LP. And particularly characters that are like in the front line will end up getting targeted more often and then killed more often. I think especially at the early game, it's more relevant because you don't have as many evasion abilities or ways to mitigate damage that you get later. But I think it works in the system because for one thing, this is a game where you heal automatically after every battle.
Mm.
So you're not really managing health as a resource between battles. It's just individually in battle. And what that allows them to do is create like fights where even like regular fights can be pretty dangerous and like have the capability of wiping your characters. Like characters can go down in just like a couple hits in a lot of cases. So there is like, I think it does make it so that each individual combat encounter can be more challenging, but then you still have that resource management with the LP
Yeah.
system across multiple battles.
I
um,
I would agree with that if I ever came close to running out of LP. That's my only problem.
mhm.
I don't know if it was just like I am not that skilled, you know what I mean? Like I was struggling with this game. But like it was just like it felt like I was never going to run out of it before I was going to be forced to generation skip. Does that make sense? Like otherwise I agree with you,
Yeah.
because early on it it gave me like, I was like, oh my gosh, my archer who was so OP and at the end of the game was like pushing out like 15k a hit. Like I was like, oh, what's gonna happen if I lose them? And like, well, I'm not gonna lose them because I'm in a generation skip and then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, like the Emperor. I don't. There aren't a lot of situations where you're worried about the Emperor specifically losing all their LP, but I do think it becomes more relevant for like the other characters in your party, and then that creates situations where a character might be pretty low on LP, and that gives you a reason to maybe switch them out with a different
Mm.
character in within one generation. There are definitely times where I ran into that, where like I'm like, okay, well this character has like 2 LP left, so am I going to go through this entire dungeon and risk them like completely wiping out or swap them out with another character? And there are times where I did that rather than just continue on.
Generally, you're only going through like maybe 1 to 3 dungeons per generation, though. So yeah, it's like even if my heavy infantry did get wiped out, or like say the mage, the female mage would have like 8 LP because she's like very squishy. If she gets knocked out, which never happened, she's back the next generation anyway. So yeah, it doesn't really feel. When I first started the game, I felt really stressed out by that. I'm like, oh my god, like this game is gonna like, you know, make my palms sweat the entire time. But it didn't turn out that way. And I don't know about the like original, but there are ways to like restore your LP, but it's in like very subtle ways. Like the witch that I mentioned, you can
Yeah.
return to her, and for like
Hmm.
10,000 gold, which is nothing in like the coifers of the coffers of the empire, you can like restore 1 LP to any character, right? Which you have to kind of go through this annoying menu every single time. But yeah, you can stock up on like a bunch of LP potions like for the end game.
Oh, are
But
you able to just like buy them in succession? Because like I
yeah.
did get to the witch, but for the restraint with this version was I could spend like you could only hold 10,000 gold in your pocket. at a time,
Oh,
your party. So
really?
I would have to spend all my money just to buy the one potion, and then if I wanted to buy another potion, I'd have to go all the way back to Avalon,
Huh.
get 10,000 more gold, and then go back. So the witch situation is actually really restrictive from that
Interesting.
front.
No, that's
Mhm.
not the case in this version.
Okay.
Yeah, you can
We
just
have like 5
carry
million gold in your
as
pocket at all
much gold.
times.
Yeah.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay, shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, bigger pockets in the remake, I see.
Yeah,
Yep.
finally. I agree. Like I with Zach, like I started playing the game on classic difficulty, but the boss that made me knock it down to like the default remake difficulty was the like Cthulhu looking guy, like the in the sewers. That boss was just like wiping my party with every move, no matter how much I prepared. And I think like if I did a playthrough, I would do it on like a higher difficulty. But there are certain difficulty spikes where like the game doesn't prepare you, or like you don't know what you're walking into. So by the time you get to the boss at the end of a dungeon, which surprise surprise, it's a 7 hero or something, like you have no idea of knowing like what's at the end of each dungeon. Like it seems like an
Yeah.
innocuous quest, but it ends up being like Noel or something. And then it's like, well, I'm totally not prepared for like anti-sword or anti-fire defenses, and so I have to like run back out of the dungeon, run back all the way through it. That was a bit annoying to me, but it doesn't take that long when
Well,
it's
or
all said and
like
done.
when I've encountered that scenario, I usually just it's only really happened once so far, but it was like the giant from like going all the way south, like past like the
Mhm.
Moo territory. There's like a really difficult boss just called Giant in this version.
Huh.
And I knew I had no chance of like winning the fight because I was like trying a couple times while like fully optimizing my strategy. But I'm like, okay, if I'm going down, I'm gonna go down by glimmering evasions for his strongest attacks. So I like kind of embrace the wipe, but like I've then got glimmers that would then make the fight easier for a future generation. So
Hmm.
on that front, it was actually like kind of interesting because again, like you can't just in the remaster go out of the dungeon and like refit your party. The only way you can change out your party members is if they encounter LP death, and then you're allowed to like hire a new character essentially. So you just have to like stick with whatever like loadout you have, which is a little stressful, but it makes you kind of like go with the flow and like accept whatever fate your party goes, like encounters on whatever quest you try, which is kind of interesting, honestly, because you're still, glimmering things, you're still gaining progress, even if you wipe.
That
Mhm.
is cool. I feel like in the remake at least, or I think in the old game too, it's like the 7 heroes specifically, like you do want to beat them as early as possible because they get stronger as time goes on. But like any other boss, yeah, I totally see the benefit of that. And like that's what sets it apart from like Dragon Quest, which is also very episodic and
Yeah.
fragmented like that.
Well, and even if the heroes are getting stronger, you're always getting stronger too, right? So
Yeah.
every successive generation, you're always getting more powerful. You have more skills. You have more tools in your toolbox. And so, even though the game does like you know get stronger with you, I think it does maintain like a healthy challenge throughout the game. And I do think that the game is best played on like the highest difficulty, because it really makes you engage with the mechanics and like learn the systems, um, to
Yeah, it does.
progress. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I played on classic and it pushed me. And I think that we haven't talked so much about I think that, one of the things that might seem immediately frustrating, but like later on you realize isn't so much, is the way that skills do glimmer. We haven't talked so
Mhm.
much about that yet. But like in this version, at least, or in the remake version, you get this little light bulb next to
Mhm.
abilities as you're attacking, and it kind of indicates that like you might then quote unquote glimmer or get a new ability with that weapon each time.
You
And
might.
yeah, it's really nice. And as you're doing that, and as you're glimmering abilities, one of the things that I think as I'm playing through and as I am glimmering new abilities and things like that, the first couple of generations, I'm like, what's going to happen if I don't get the right ability? And the answer is like, go to the next generation. And I
Mhm.
think that we've kind of talked about this a little bit, like because you're glimmering abilities, you eventually get the ability to then, as you go to another generation, at least in the remake, you have the ability to then assign different skills from the previous generation to other people who like sort of have some affinity with that weapon.
Mm.
And I found that really stressful at first, but then I realized like that it's actually highly customizable, and I can kind of like each new generation gave me that ability to like kind of like optimize my kit. And then like I would get then another generation, I could optimize that kit a little bit more and optimize that a little bit more. And I wasn't so worried about the glimmering. I think the glimmering only becomes an issue in the very late game, which I'll get into in the second episode. But while there is a degree of randomness to it, you ultimately have so much control over what skills you inherit and what skills you use that it didn't bother me as much. But that was something that sort of stressed me out early on as well.
Mhm. But and it also ensures that you're getting new skills like throughout the game,
Yeah.
right? So you're there's always like another carrot on the end of the stick for you to chase and try to get that can change up your strategy. And it's a way for the game to always like add new wrinkles to the combat or to your loadout and giving you more reasons to change up your party or your strategy. I think it's very common in a lot of more traditional turn-based RPGs to like develop a strategy and just like stick with it throughout the whole game. And this game really does a lot to like push you out of your comfort zone, whether that's like the different boss fights or whether that's giving you like a new ability or a new reward, or equipment even, because equipment is pretty important in this game as well, both the equipment that you're developing through your facilities, which we haven't talked about yet either, or the equipment that you can find in dungeons and stuff like that. There's a lot of different, it's always giving you something new to like play with and experiment. And that just makes the game really fun. Because you're always like, oh, well, what happens if I try this? Or what happens if I try this party combination?
Mhm.
Or we haven't really talked a bunch about the formations, but that's another thing. Formations are basically how your party is arrayed in battle, and they confer different effects. And switching classes with your emperor will give you access to new formations, and the formations are a big part of your overall strategy as well, because you can really change like how you're interacting with combat based on how you have your units arranged and the bonuses they get from that. So there's just always some new like tool to get, and can kind of throw a wrench in what you were doing before and make you want to change things up.
I liked the like turn by turn gambling aspect of the glimmering, where like I could try my tried and true attack that I've been using again and again, or I could go for like a basic attack which will unlock this new potential ability. It reminded me of Jack from Wild Arms, the first Wild Arms. Like
Oh yeah.
he too, you had to like keep rolling the dice on these new moves, hoping that they would unlock. And I just like that like small decision that you had to make, like, on the fly. Although sometimes, yeah, it would unlock an ability where you intend to shoot, like, let's say, a wind arrow, and your character will suddenly shoot a fire arrow instead because they just unlocked it, right? And it's like, oh, like you just healed the enemy, or there were cases like that sometimes, but that's like very rare. But in a difficult game like this where every turn counts, that was like part of the gamble, I think, which I enjoyed actually. But
Mhm.
the
Well, that's
formations. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that's part of the tabletop influence too. Like sometimes if you're you're playing like D&D or something, you're like,
It's
oh, I'm
gonna
gonna do
whiff.
this. Yes, it's gonna whiff, or it's gonna have an unintended consequence that the DM decides to impose on you at the time, and so it's kind of them trying to convey that mechanically through the combat system, which is kind of fun.
You could roll a nat one. But
Hmm.
I'm stupid, and I didn't know that like every time that you get a new generation of Emperor, you have to go to the training hall to unlock the formation.
Oh yeah.
Took me a minute to
Yeah,
realize that
that's
too.
a pretty
That's
Yeah.
important detail.
silly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So I lost out on like 4 or 5 different ones because I'm like, why am I just using Imperial Cross the whole time?
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm surprised the
Imperial
remake
Cross is
didn't
good though.
tell you.
Well, they do tell you.
Oh, okay.
There's a tutorial. So
I don't
Matt
read
was
a lot of
skipping everything.
information
Yeah,
here, y'all.
yeah.
I don't read
Sorry.
that stuff.
A
Come
lot
on.
of information.
Sorry, Matt. Not
Well,
to put you
it's
on
illogical.
blast.
Why should it's illogical that you would have to walk back there? Like you should just have the formation.
Yeah. I'm not blaming the game like I'm blaming myself, but I was reviewing a very awful game at the time, so I was just like, I gotta get through this, and like this Saga game, I just gotta finish it. But yeah, this was my respite from that horrible game, so I think I liked it all the more for that.
Well, that's good. That's good.
I will say the way like the whole action based leveling system is cool in a lot of ways. But it can also be very tedious, at least in the original version. Maybe it's the same in the remake, but just the fact that basically from what I read, because I had to learn everything about the game just through external guides, is that you should use as many different action types, including like weapons and spell elements, as possible in like every battle to like get the most balanced kind of leveling. And what that ended up being is like a lot of like battles in this game end up feeling very samey. Firstly, because there's not enough enemy types, but also because of this fact that I'm just like cycling through and like the battle UI in the remaster is pretty bad. All these different types of actions, sometimes using spells or like weapon types that aren't actually very effective, just to try to get more experience. Because also leveling your different spell elements takes friggin' forever.
Yeah.
And like the way you get combination spells is you have to like reach very high levels in like pairings of like different elements, and then you start like learning the combination spells. I haven't learned a single combination spell yet, even though I've been like trying to use as many spells as possible. And just the battles become like very tedious in this game for that reason. And this game is just so the gameplay loop is so just battle focused. And the fact that like with the lack of enemy types and going through these motions trying to level, it can be a little tedious when you're not like getting that like challenge level that the game at its best is able to maintain.
Yeah, I
I
don't.
think
Oh, go ahead, Zach.
I was just gonna say in the remake, that is not how I felt,
Yeah.
at all. I think that at least in the classic difficulty, every fight there is a danger that like if you let the enemy take a turn, that someone's gonna die. Um, and so I was always I couldn't I really didn't worry about that. Now I agree with you. I think that it's annoying the fusion spell thing because like in the remake at least, you get books for fusion spells, and
Mm.
you still have to have
Oh,
like
okay.
a certain level for like let's say for like one of the most important ones in the entire game is one called Light Wall. You have to have a certain level in light magic and a certain level in earth magic, and then you can cast Light Wall, which halves the damage coming in. Very important spell later on. But like I did that on a couple of different people, and so I'd have to go through and I would just have to like use one spell each time, and that was actually tedious in and of itself. I still I found that the grind to get specific things, and I'll get more into this in the second half, was a little frustrating, but I don't think that what you're describing would actually be an effective tactic in the remake because it would water down your characters too much.
Yeah, I agree with that, Zach. I think that I think some of what you're describing, Alex, is more a problem with the game communicating the mechanics to you as a player than it is with the actual underlying mechanics. Like in the remake in particular, when you're in combat, like generally I actually think that the enemy variety is rather good. Like most enemy encounters, you know, you have a quite a few different enemy types in most enemy groups, and they have a pretty decent variety of like weaknesses. So you do feel like there's an opportunity to use like the different weapon types or skill types or spell types, and use them effectively if you're picking your targets correctly. Like I think it's very rare that you're like, oh, I'm just going through the motions of doing this because I need to level up my skills. It's like there's always usually like an applicable target for what you're both wanting to progress in for your characters and how you're wanting to like eliminate enemies in battle efficiently.
Mm.
But I think it's because like the way that the weaknesses and everything are presented to the player is a lot more clear. So like underneath the enemies, you know, where they're arranged in formation in the and battle, there's like little squares, and it shows you like what their weaknesses are. And so once you've discovered the weakness on the enemy, you kind of like know and carry that into further battles. And so you
Oh, the
have
remake makes all that transparent, eh?
yes,
Okay.
yes. So and they usually have like 4 or 5 different weaknesses. And so you once you know your initial fight is like, oh, I need to discover what the weaknesses are. So you're using a lot of different spells and abilities on enemies without the knowledge of like
Mhm.
what they're weak to. But then once you have that knowledge, you then go into all the other battles with that. And so then it becomes more about efficiency.
Mhm.
And so that is, you know, they haven't really changed the underlying battle structure at all, but they're just communicating to the player like you can now look at the enemy and know what I'm supposed to use or what's going to be more effective. And so you're not doing as much guesswork. And so I think what you're describing, Alex, is that like because it's all like opaque, you're just like having to just randomly decide what I'm going to use here. And the remake is just like, no, here's what's actually useful and what's not. And what's actually useful is still really broad. So you have a lot of different options, and you're naturally just developing those skills. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense, but it's not just that. It's also definitely when I was in the early game, I felt like I had to be choosing my moves optimally just to like get through the battle without like wiping.
Mhm.
I'm just at maybe at an awkward midpoint in the game where the enemies haven't really scaled with where I am in terms of like the different quest lines, and so I'm just like fighting the same enemy types that I was fighting in the early game, and like I'm just like figuring that I should level my master level because like there's like the individual levels each character has for the different skills, but by using more just spells in every single battle encounter, you upgrade the master level, and that's how you start unlocking combination spells, right?
Mhm.
So it's just the battles are easy enough that I'm just doing that just to be efficient in terms of like how I'm spending my time battling. And it's just getting like a little boring at this point. But maybe I'm just like about to encounter like a difficulty spike that will make me have to like think a little more optimally again.
Maybe you're just that good.
How many
I don't think so.
how many heroes have you fought, Alex, at this point?
I just fought Xinzi and Bokon.
Oh, okay, that's 100% why.
It's gonna get a
Yeah.
lot harder.
Yeah, it's gonna
Yeah.
change a
Okay.
lot.
I can't
You
find these damn heroes.
They'll pop up. They'll surprise
yeah, it'll happen. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
you. The thing about the remake is like, yeah, when you get the XP at the end of a battle, like it levels up your HP and BP, but I think you can only level up like 2 abilities or weapons at a time. So if you do like a big boss battle,
That's not true.
is that not true?
That's not true.
I thought it
You can
only
level up as
shows.
many things as you use.
Yeah.
Does it really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Am I wrong that it
It
doesn't
is.
show them on like the?
It does show them, but you can do more.
Oh, okay.
I was testing this, so yeah.
Okay.
It may be, I forget how many can display at once in the UI, so it may be that it's displaying one and then displaying the next one really quickly, and so you're just not
Flashing
you
between
just
the
didn't
two.
see it. Yeah.
Okay, that works out. Does anyone know, like, does it share like XP between them? Like, does it divide it in half?
It's
Or
based on how much you used it. So
okay,
if you use like like 5 water spells and then you use the spear attack once, you're gonna get way more EXP for this water spell than you will for like the spear.
gee, you think
Essentially.
I didn't just play this game for 30 hours? But
No. It's a very mechanically dense game, and as much as the remake does a much better job at conveying to the player, like the mechanics, I'm saying that in reference to the original version. That does not mean that it's conveying everything to the player as well as maybe some other games do, right? Like there's still a level of vagueness, and I think the discussion we've been having kind of gets at that, right? Like there's still a lot of like things that are not just like immediately obvious to you as the player when you're playing it. It's just that it's it's very obscured in the original, and they've wiped some of that away, but without giving fully everything to you. And so I think it's easy to kind of have those misconceptions about the mechanics because it's not explicitly telling you like this is how it works most of the time.
I think it really appeals to like the hardcore RPG people who like to min max and everything like that. Like this game has a lot of potential that you can dig up in that way. Like I said,
Absolutely.
I'm more of like a
Mhm.
story music kind of guy. Like Final Fantasy is my favorite, but like
Mhm.
I'm surprised that someone like Solosi is not a fan because the whole time I'm playing it, I'm like I could see someone going crazy over this game, like with Excel spreadsheets and all this.
Mhm.
Like it definitely appeals to that
Maybe it's just
RPG
the
fan.
learning curve. Like the onboarding is so tough that like you have to invest a lot of time and into like just playing, failing, reading rules in order to like just even understand. I feel like I need this whole first playthrough in order to like really understand what's going on in
Yeah,
this game, and then
Mhm.
I'd
that's
get
right.
more out of it maybe in a second playthrough. But yeah, it's just like a really deep game with a lot to learn.
Yeah, I mean that's why I love this game. I've played it quite a few times now, and every time I just love it more. I mean, I've been playing through for this, and I'm like, oh man, I can't get enough because it just holds. I mean, I also am really into like the Fire Emblem series, for example. That's a similar thing where I can play a Fire Emblem game 15, 20 times, and I'm figuring out new things and applying new things to different scenarios. Even that many times through, and I think this game kind of has the ability to
Yeah.
convey that and give you that much experimentation and variety across multiple playthroughs. And I'm not as in like there are, of course, like story games, like games that are narrative focused that have a really high quality narrative and good writing, really speak to me. But I don't find that most games fit that description. And
Yeah.
so I'm much more interested in games for their mechanical depth and systems. And that's, I think, why this game appeals to me so much, because they really spent so much time like developing the systems in a really interesting way. And the way that those systems interlock together, I think is really, really engaging in this game. And we didn't really talk about the kingdom development, but that's also a huge part, I think, of the
Mm.
mechanics in this game, is like developing your smithy and your university and your gardens and the incantation lab, and that sense of progression that you get across the generations. You're always working towards better equipment and more access to spells and things like that over time. That just is very compelling.
Yeah, I mean, I think that even to go back to the narrative, like this is not a game obviously that has an interesting narrative at all, but it is telling what little narrative it has in a really interesting way, right?
Hmm.
Hmm.
This is a thing that I know Alex likes to talk about a lot with narrative design, and so it's telling its narrative in a really it's telling its extremely non-compelling narrative in a really compelling way. And I think that its systems are all really compelling, and it's almost like an RPG playground where it's like there's
Yeah.
so many different things happening. I will admit that occasionally I found all those things exhausting, the same way that, and I've spent a lot of my paternity leave playing Fire Emblem too. I'm going to blame Ben for all my problems lately. Like the same way that I find Fire Emblem too. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I can't. Okay, I'm done. I can't do this another map tonight. Like I'm mentally exhausted, and this game mentally exhausted me. But I think that, like Ben, like as I've gotten older, at least I am less interested in video games for storytelling, because I just think they're generally, even at their best, fine.
Mm.
Um, and but the mechanical richness of this game is so high. I have some issues with the way the mechanics of this game play out, and I will talk more about them next time, because I think that as rich as it is, I think sometimes it has sort of a find our solution or there is no solution
Mhm.
issue, which I'll get into. But it's still exciting to figure that out. So I'm kind of with Ben on this one.
Yeah, this game has plenty of things I like for the reason you just raised, Zach. One thing I'll just say I wish it had, that I know like the next couple Saga games actually do have, is just more variety in the gameplay loop. Just the fact that this game has just been basically get a new emperor, spend a bunch of time, frankly too much time, outfitting a new party, especially with just how that works and like all the motions and
That doesn't take
dialogues
very
you have to
long
go
in
through.
the remaster, just
And
so you know.
Or in the
uh,
remake, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
The
figured they
remake,
would
I'm sorry.
address that
Yeah.
because it's frankly insane in this version. And then you go to a town, you talk to very boring NPCs who speak in proper nouns and tell you unlock new places on the map. And then you go to a dungeon and you battle and you battle and you battle and you battle. Like, uh, again, I loved like the ways I was encountering quests and everything, but just like a little bit more flavor. Maybe like just like some interludes where there's like more than just battling, some mini games or something. So stuff that Saga Frontier did a bit more of, I think, would just make this game a little bit less grating when I'm playing it with very long sessions, because that's really when I start to feel this. In shorter sessions, I don't mind, but sitting down with this game and just doing the same battles for so long is probably my biggest hang up with the experience so far.
So
Even
Alex,
though I'm enjoying a lot about
There's
it.
not even a fishing mini game. Is it even a JRPG?
Alex, I would say that this is one of the primary reasons why I prefer the remake over the original, is that they do kind of address that with the approach to. That's one of the things that the game really benefits from the move to like a 3D polygonal environment, is that the dungeons have a lot more like traversal or puzzle mechanics or things like that in
Oh,
them.
really?
Platforming.
Platforming, yeah.
I think that's maybe
Really?
a little generous, to be honest with you.
Well, it's
puzzle.
well,
Verticality.
I mean, Bakan's dungeon, right, is like very, I mean, it's a puzzle. It's not like a puzzle like in a Wild Arms game, right? But it's like you have to
Right.
navigate the dungeon and figure out how to navigate the dungeon, and they make that interesting, right? And like there are also different, doing different quests will lead you to different ways of navigating a dungeon or approaching a dungeon. And they really do a lot with the move to like the more fully realized environments in that way. And then so that I think gives a little more detail to the spaces that you're in and gives them a more of a sense of place. And then also
That's
the
good.
way you interact with them is there's more to it than just like walking down a linear hallway and fighting battles.
Mm.
And then they add a couple other things like, there's like the Mr. S hunt that you can do in the towns. And you have like a stamp book basically. And every for each one that you find, you get a stamp, and then a certain progression through the stamp book, you get new rewards. So there's like little things like that they add as well to try to kind of break it up the gameplay a little bit.
That was delightful finding Mr.
Yeah.
S, like cute every time. Yeah.
And Mr. S is a character from Saga 2. He's like your sensei. Is I think why they call him Mr. S in English. But he's like this yellow alien guy.
That just occurred to me. That's embarrassing.
I thought it was Mr. SaGa the whole time.
No,
honestly.
he's like the kind of the series mascot.
I remember, yeah, sort of like your sensei at the very beginning of Saga 2. Yeah.
Yep. So they do add a few things to like actually break up the monotony a little bit, if you will. But I agree, Alex. I mean, in the sense that like this game is a dungeon crawler. Like it's not presented like a dungeon crawler. It's presented like a traditional, like turn-based RPG, but it is very much a dungeon crawler. It has a lot more in common with Etrian Odyssey than it does Final Fantasy. And that is an expectation I think if people haven't played this game, they should go in with. Is that you're really playing like a dungeon crawler with like higher production value.
Well, I think that is selling a little short just how engaging and surprising the non-linear quest design can be, because that is something unique to this game
that's true. Yeah.
That is a really nice touch. That's honestly been, I think I said it before, the highlight of my experience. I guess the one other thing about the dungeons, which maybe they just replaced with the much more engaging stuff you were just describing, Ben, is that basically the only thing to navigating dungeons in the original / remaster is that different enemy types, like it's not random battles, like you see the enemies on the map, and every like enemy type, whether it's like a skeleton, a Valkyrie, a slime, has like a different movement pattern. And so you can try to like study them and like move around through the dungeon so you like have as few encounters as possible. And that's been like kind of engaging but kind of annoying when it doesn't work out, to be honest. So I'm guessing that doesn't translate onto the 3D space, which is why they added so much more to the dungeons.
Instead you have like you can attack them from behind and get like a preemptive strike attack.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the enemies do have like different behavior on the field. So it's not exactly like what you're describing, Alex, from the original, but there is still a degree to like you need to pay attention to what kind of monster it is, and like if you want to get the preemptive attack, like wait for them to turn around, or the way they move might be more erratic or less erratic or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So they still have a bit of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
And then, like, of course, in the remake, like we talked about, like once in a while you'll catch a glimpse of like a blue trail that you follow to this like ancient machine that will show you a cutscene. I think there's 15 or 16 of them detailing the lore of the 7 heroes, which reminded me of Breath of the Wild, like uncovering the champions in the past.
Okay.
Yeah, it's similar like storytelling in that way, but
yeah, it's very similar, and it's literally they just plopped these story bits in the dungeons. Like they're not like there's not a whole lot of rhyme or reason to which dungeons they place those in and what memories are accessed in each location.
I see. So it's not like you get a better sense of the heroes through the locations or anything.
I mean, you do, but not necessarily the hero that you're pursuing. Like I remember,
Yes.
like I got one right outside of Noelle, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to learn more about Noelle." It had absolutely nothing to do with Noelle. I was like, "Okay, cool." And I can summarize it for you very quickly. They saved the world, and people weren't happy enough about it, and they attacked them. So then they became that which they hated the most. The end. It's stupid.
There's more like specifics than that, but yeah, that is like the overall. Yeah. Well, there's some interesting, like Saga really likes to put in like science fiction elements into the fantasy setting. So there is like this, it's like they're trying to build like a massive interdimensional teleportation device, which is kind of an interesting idea, right? But they don't really do a whole lot with that, right? So like uh I don't disagree with your summary, Zach. Just there are some like sort of interesting details within the lore, but they're not really used to any real effective narrative purpose, is what I would
Yeah.
say.
You and I just disagree on whether it's interesting. That's
Yeah,
all.
yeah,
So
yeah. But and in the locations that you find the seven heroes in, I think that's a thing the remake does really well. Also, is that you do, and this is something I think I mentioned in my review a couple years ago, is that their elements of their personality come through in the locations that you find them in. So like Subie in particular, like because he's this warrior who's like an honorable warrior who's just like into tests of skill, like his dungeon is just like a gauntlet, like a straight line gauntlet of powerful monsters, and then he's at the end of it as like the king. But then like Bakan's like location is like this really complex labyrinth of like traps and enemy ambushes and stuff, because he's a more like plotting, sinister, behind the scenes kind of guy. And I think a lot of the most of the locations that you find the heroes in do integrate elements of their personality into the location, which is kind of a unique bit of like world building that the game employs.
No,
The
that sounds like nice flavor. I would appreciate. Yeah.
I guess we'll talk about like the heroes next time, but I do like how like their designs are also like so varied. Like some of them are still retaining that humanity, some of them are like completely monstrous. That was
yeah.
interesting.
I mean, I've looked at the original sprites, and as cool as I think the designs are in this one, I think you pointed this out, Matt. Like, they're so much cooler in the original,
Yeah.
the original sprite work. But I do think they maintain it reasonably well. I don't want to go too far into that.
I was gonna ask like what you guys thought of the character designs for the classes, because you can't attach yourself to any kind of like characterization or personality, but like some of the characters, I don't know, like I hated the designs. Like the mage with like the bald head and like the giant like puff on the back of his head, the male mage. I every time
Oh,
I
the enchanter or whatever,
one of
right?
them,
Like
like he's so
yeah,
like he's so powerful, but he looks terrible. So like I
he looks
hate having him in my
hideous.
party.
Yeah,
Yeah, like I don't know, the designs were so like hit or miss for me. Some of them were just
yeah.
like okay, very generic or very weird. Like the mercenary classes were weird too, like the woman with like the top
Yeah,
hat and everything.
those are
Wait,
very.
what?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
they're very typical Tomomi Kobayashi designs, right? So like the Saga series has these very almost like, like Amano's designs for like Final Fantasy characters, and then they
Mm.
end up being pretty different. The actual interpretation in game versus what Amano's artwork looks like. But the Saga series in general, like Kobayashi's designs are very fanciful and kind of
Mhm.
elaborate, like Amano's designs,
Yeah, they're beautiful.
but they are much more closely represented in the games usually to her designs, as opposed to like they kind of just interpret whatever Amano did, or Amano's interpreting what other character designer did. These are much closer, so you get those elements like you're talking about, Matt, with like the really weird looking mercenary
Yeah,
classes, where the male also has like these feathers and like this like eye patch, but it's not an eye patch, it's like a lens or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
And yeah, she has these like very elaborate kind of almost fashionista kind of designs, and that's just part of the series identity. And I actually think they did a pretty good job of adapting those to like a 3D models, like keeping a lot of those design elements. I do think that they make it a little too generic anime, but the developer previously did the Trials of Mana remake and then this one,
Uh,
and I think that this remake is a much better like marriage of those two styles than Trials of Mana, which I felt like was just kind of not really a great interpretation of those original character designs. Whereas here, I think they were much more successful in maintaining a lot of what Kobayashi's character designs made them unique and interesting. But that does mean that some of them look really freaking weird, like you're talking about. Yeah,
I would have
but
liked a little more edge, and like I think they tried striking the balance between like Dragon Quest a little too much by making it cute and colorful in that way, where it's like I'm okay with colors, but yeah, the sprites just seem like intimidating, imposing. Like the designs are creepy, but like just like the roundness, the colorfulness of them, like kind of saps them of their, I don't know, intimidation factor. But the
Mhm.
characters too, like I want more like of a Western, like it is a very like European inspired game. I feel like so I want a slightly more European art style. Like that would be cool. I think to differentiate it from the other Square Enix titles.
Yeah, my end, the sprite work for the different classes and whatnot have just been fantastic and really helped inject more personality into like a game that is otherwise really missing it through like story and writing.
Mhm.
Like all of my party, I've tried to like use as much variety as possible, and just the fact like I have all of these like nice like FF6 looking sprites. They've all looked really cool and really just like it kind of exerted a bit more personality I was able to project onto them. Is It's just been fantastic. Like, and also just like the I've even noticed straight up particular assets like sprite animation, sound effects, that were used in this ended up in FF6 because I know this came first. Like for instance, like Leon, the Emperor you start with, like his some of his attack animations and just like after you select a command, the little like crunch up he does, it's straight up Edgar from FF6. It's so cool.
Oh,
And like the shield block sound effect is exactly the same as FF6. So seeing like that lineage and development history has just been like really cool because obviously, companies reuse assets as much as possible to save on development costs, and seeing that there's like an asset tradition between Final Fantasy and Saga was just really cool.
Yeah, yeah, and they do try to use, I think, like the move to, they just try to justify the move to like 3D polygonal visuals by like adding details that would be really hard to do in a sprite. So like characters will have scars, or they'll have different hairstyles, or they'll have different like visual elements or accessories on the character models from generation to generation. So that allows the characters to like have a little bit of unique personality. But I agree, Alex. I think what you're describing with like the elements that you recognize from Final Fantasy being represented in Saga, like these two series are very much intertwined, right? Like the birth of Saga was really Final Fantasy 2, and so
mm,
they've always kind of existed in tandem with one another, and I think drawing a little bit from one another. So the kind of highlighting that connection, I think, is important. Because yeah, they are kind of like sisters to each other,
Yeah.
right? And Saga is kind of like the redheaded stepchild a little bit, but at least I think for Western fans. In Japan, that's not. I don't think it's as much. Like this game was like sold like 1.5 million copies in Japan on the Super Famicom, so it was like a very very mainstream success. And so I think our perception of it here is a little different than the perception in Japan sometimes, but yeah, they're very building off of each other, but going in very different directions, I
Mhm.
think.
It's hard for me to picture the original version of this game as a mainstream success. It doesn't make any sense to me. No matter how different tastes are across cultures, that's wild. Um, even the remake. I wonder how many times I said remaster when I meant remake today. I think that I would be drunk if I had to take a shot every time. Definitely would be. Well, thank the three of you so much for talking about the mechanics of this game. We haven't really talked about the content almost at all. I promise listeners we will do that next time. But as we were chatting, you probably realized this game is so non-linear that like it's really difficult for us to talk about things because we've all seen different stuff. Um, but speaking of that, in 2 weeks, you will hear us talk about the rest of the mechanics and how it all plays out in Romancing Saga 2. We'll finish up our conversation, and I'm really curious to hear how Aleks does as he gets through the end game
I'm
of
honestly
this one.
terrified.
Because I would be too. The final boss of this game on classic difficulties may be the most challenging turn-based battle I've had outside of a super boss. So I'm curious to see what that's like in the original.
Let's hope I can actually beat it.
Yeah, if you don't, it's okay. 2 weeks after that, we're going to be talking about a very different topic. We're going to be talking about science fiction RPGs, so RPGs that take place in space or have elements of them that take place in space. Talking about something that I can't believe we've never had a dedicated science fiction RPG episode, but we're going to be chatting about those. And then 2 weeks after that, we will start our game journal on Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which is a very, very long sort of sci-fi, definitely sci-fi RPG that I'm excited to revisit with the Switch 2. It's not a remaster, but the Switch 2 update is beautiful. So very excited to dig back into that. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us retro@rpgfan.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, or X, Blue Sky, Twitch, YouTube, or we also have a Discord. We also have a shop hosted by TeePublic. You can find that on rpgfan.com. We also have 2 other fine podcasts. One is Random Encounter, usually hosted by John Logan, about current events, usually games that have just come out, been reviewed. I know that this won't be the most recent one when this actually goes up, but Ben was on a few weeks ago now to talk about the Pokemon DLC, and he was great on that episode. So we also have Rhythm Encounter, which is, as far as I'm aware, currently on hiatus. There are some talks about getting it off of hiatus, but our host, Mike Salvato, is the busiest man at RPG Fan. So it's a question of when the labor will be there to get it back out. But rest assured, the plan is still in place for Rhythm Encounter to come back at some point, just not sure when or how yet. You can also review us wherever you're listening to us. I don't know, give us 5 stars. If it's less than 5 stars, you can email me or even come into the Discord and you can trash me there. But like, it would be really nice if you left the 5-star reviews on the platforms. It improves visibility. Let's talk about where you can find the individual panelists, starting with you, Aleks.
You can email me at alexfraniczek@gmail.com.
And Matt.
Read my writing and everyone here's writing at rpgfan.com.
Perfect. And Ben?
Yeah, you can email me at benloganlove@gmail.com.
And the best way to get in touch with me is probably actually Discord, Zach W there, but also email zachw@rpgfan.com. Gotten a few different emails recently, and actually I can say this now, and I'll put an announcement at the beginning of some future episodes. We are quickly approaching, speaking of contacting us, we're quickly approaching episode 500 of Retro Encounter, which is an insane milestone. And I already know what that episode's going to be about. And it's going to be bringing back a format that we haven't done for 250 episodes. And it's going to be a mailbag episode. Now, granted, that episode is not going to go up until, I think, the beginning of December. So I'm saying this pretty prematurely. But if you want to get in touch with us, send us some questions, anything that you want us to discuss on episode 500, shoot me an email. You can even hit me on Discord, on social media, anywhere. And we'll be discussing that on episode 500. But I will be continuously reminding listeners between here and episode 500. But speaking of that, I also want to thank you, listeners, for listening. And I want to thank you, panelists, for coming on and talking about this mechanically rich and sometimes very infuriating game. And thank you. Good night and good luck.